chair, you can't see those who are sleeping. You're a little bit higher up, because I believe that communication is eye to eye somehow. Anyway, thank you, Timothy. It's good to be here. Got a bit to share about what I've been living now for 46 years with Raphael and Philippe and many other people with sometimes very severe disabilities and sometimes with a bit less severe disabilities. And I want to share a little bit with what I've learned. Nothing really prepared me to live with people with disabilities. My last ship was an aircraft carrier. That doesn't help you too much. And the doctorate in Aristotle, don't put aside Aristotle. Great guy. So nothing prepared. But what I discovered, that they are amongst the people who are the most oppressed of our world. They're very beautiful people, but they're put aside. And you can't imagine, or maybe you can, the cruelty with which many have lived their lives. In streets, on the streets, in big institutions, obliged to live with professionals. It's an immense amount of pain. Their parents deeply disappointed to have a child like that. I can understand. We're in a culture where there's the tyranny of normality, where we have to go up the ladder, know more, have more. And those who are more fragile are shunned, put away. Of course, today, many are killed before their birth, and many are killed after their birth. Like Eric, that we welcomed in my community in 1978. Been in the psychiatric hospital for 18 years. He was blind, he was deaf, very severe disability. He couldn't walk. And I don't think I've seen any young person or old person living with so much anguish. Terrible feeling of loneliness, even in a psychiatric hospital, because he wasn't easy to work with or to live with. I won't go into the details. But many people will see people like Eric as no value. Not really human. And I can tell you that people with disabilities oblige us to enter into a mystery. I use the word mystery. Because they are not wanted. No parent wants to have a child with disabilities. The parents of Eric didn't want a child like that. It was the first son that his mother had. She didn't know what to do. She was confused. As little by little she discovered the intensity, the gravity of the handicap of the little son. So she put him at the psychiatric hospital. She went once to the psychiatric hospital, but was so disappointed with what she saw that she never returned. So the anguish of loneliness, the anguish of being put aside, the anguish sometimes of being seen as a punishment from God. And don't take that lightly, because there's that terrible question, whose fault is it? Terrible question that comes up from parents. Why us? So the discovery This is in the 60s, where people with disabilities were closed up in institutions, locked up in institutions, enclosed in the family group. And I can tell you, in countries where we have our large faith and light communities, they're frequently found in the streets. Terrible situations. What is happening? And at the same time, the discovery, a double discovery. One, the terrible divisions of our world between those who have capacities and those who have no capacities. Between those who have capacities and are in this world where there's a tyranny of normality, where we have to grow in knowledge and power to do good, yeah. Sometimes not to do good, but it's a need to go up the ladder. Terrible division, terrible wars. I remember going to Santiago, Chile, as I was being driven from the airport to the place where I was going to in Santiago. My driver said, on the left are all the slum areas of Santiago, and on the right are all the houses of rich people protected by police and military. And then he added, and nobody crosses the road. Nobody crosses the road. Wars. Some of you have been to Israel and Palestine. You know what I mean. We talk of wars. The United States is building a wall between the United States and Mexico. I read now that Greece is building a wall between Greece and Turkey. But then there are all the walls of our hearts, the walls of the prisons, the walls of the psychiatric hospitals, walls. Just incredible words of Paul. Jesus is our peace. The two people he has made one, breaking down the dividing wall of hostility in his flesh. Breaking down walls. Why walls? What is behind the wall? Fear. Somebody was saying to me, who's in contact a lot in our community in Bethlehem. We have a little community where Muslims and Christians are together. She said that the greatest armament of massive destruction is fear. What are we fighting on? You know that the first words of Adam, after he has left the presence of God, God goes after him. And you find this in the book of Genesis. Adam, where are you? What was this? The God who comes to look after us when we've run away. Where are you? I'm frightened because I'm naked. And so I hid. Three things. Fear, nakedness, hiding. Naked. That isn't just that we have no clothes. It's our fundamental fragility and our fundamental poverty. We didn't choose to be born. Eric didn't choose to have a handicap. We don't choose the day of our birth. We don't choose the accidents. We don't choose our hearts that open up and our hearts that are broken. We all have a history. Sometimes a very broken history, a history filled with with pain, where the child is abused physically, verbally, sometimes sexually. So a child cannot begin life trusting adults because he's been too knocked around and abused and hurt. The broken child, the broken heart of the child. Fear. What are we frightened of? Remember meeting in L'Arche with quite a number of people who have been in L'Arche 30 years, and we were reflecting on what have we learned in our anthropology by living with people who are fragile, sometimes very fragile, like Eric and others. The word fear came up. So each one of us, we opened up our hearts and we said, what are we the most frightened of? What are we frightened of? And the words came out: frightened of rejection, frightened of failure, frightened of not being appreciated by superiors, frightened of pain, frightened of death. Some even frightened of being loved. So fear. People with disabilities sometimes create fear. Every year in our community we have about 150 young people from different schools, places, who come to visit our community, to be in the workshops, be in the homes, and listen to people with disabilities giving their witnessing of their lives and what they have lived and what they've suffered. And then we ask these young people all to write an evaluation of what they've lived coming to L'Arche. Pretty well everyone begins with, I was frightened to come to L'Arche. I was frightened to come. Frightened of meeting the different. Frightened of meeting the outcast. Frightened of meeting the one who has suffered from rejection and with whom we don't always know how to communicate. How to communicate with people like Eric who do not speak and who can only communicate through the body. How to communicate. Sometimes we forget that the Word became flesh, so flesh becomes Word. As the body speaks, and those who cannot speak, like Eric, he speaks through the body, he communicates. But we're not always used to communicating and understanding about pain, and we're frightened of pain. And we're in this culture of normality where we all have to succeed, move up the ladder, do well at school, because if you don't do well at school, then you won't be able to become what you are yearning to become. So right from the beginning, this tyranny of normality, where we have to be strong, we have to win, we have to have a lot of knowledge, we have to have power, all that sort of stuff. Fear also of humiliation. Maybe that's the deepest. Fear of being humiliated. Where is God in all that? On what side of the street is God? That street that nobody crosses over. Because everybody is frightened. Some of those texts in the Word of God, like in Isaiah 57, my home is in the Utter, holy and eternal. My home is also with those who are crushed, pushed aside. Or the Psalm 113, I lift up the poor from the dust, and I bring up the humiliated who are the garbage. And I call them to eat with princes, to be with princes. Or Mary, he brings down the powerful from their thrones and lifts up the humiliated. So what I want to share with you is something which people have a lot of difficulty believing. That having lived with people who are very fragile, and I still am in a home in Tralee in my community, and I always eat in that home. That I've been healed by living with Albert, Eric, and the others. Healing. So I want to go a little bit into the healing. I believe that in many ways I've been transformed. It's not over yet. I'm 82. You know, when you get to 82, it seems in France that the Society of Alzheimer's sends you a little note to tell you about Alzheimer's. And it's super, they give you all the indications so that you know what Alzheimer is. I have them all. So we're on a road, all of us. We are programmed to grow, we're programmed to diminish it. It's the story of all our lives. Programmed to grow, but we're also called, dare I say, programmed to loss. It's not just diminishment towards death, but also programmed to lose many things. Lose capacities, lose whatever it is, lose responsibility, loss. So we're on this incredible pilgrimage from fragility to fragility, from great weakness to great weakness. It all begins in that incredible relationship with the baby and the parents. Incredible relationship, where we are called, or where we live, a uniqueness. Hopefully, we live uniqueness. You are my beloved son, you are my beloved daughter-in-law. I give you all my joy. And every child, hopefully. Unfortunately, it's not every child. I'm in contact with a psychiatrist who works in a prison which is for criminals and great mentally sick people. And there are 400 people, men and women, in that very tight prison psychiatric hospital. And I said, what have you learned? Because that's always the thing, it's to, what have you learned? She said, all my clients, because there were, I think, 20 psychiatrists in that prison, all my clients were abused verbally, physically, and sexually, or sexually, when they were children. See, many children begin with that extraordinary moment of I love you as you. Then something happens and you have to become normal. You have to do well in school, sports, all the rest. Instead of the hands being like that, the finger goes up. So the big question is how to make that transition and still to discover that I'm precious as I am. I'd like to say about people with disabilities. We we now have 140 different communities around the world. I have never met a man or woman with disabilities, and I'm now putting aside certain those who have very severe, like Eric. I could talk about that. But I've never met one who have a little capacity to speak, that have not made the distinction between justice and injustice, love and hate, truth and falseness. I have never met one who has not a deep personal consciousness, a personal conscience, and know what is right and know what is wrong. Though many of them, and I'm going to give you an example, that consciousness, that freedom of conscience can be crushed because of the culture or because of rejection. Because of a culture which says your conscience is to become important, acclaimed by authority, to do well and to be success. Whereas conscience is to know what is good for me, what is right for me, not just what is useful or pleasurable. So, on some side of the street is God. I want to speak to you of somebody, a very important woman who died a year and a half ago, but I want to share with you a bit, which will help you discover a bit what we live in L'Arche. Her name is Janine. She came to L'Arche when she was 40 in 1973. Hemiplegic, epileptic, other physical difficulties. She had grown fat. She had made herself ugly. And when she came, she was incredibly violent. She had one arm paralyzed and one leg paralyzed. She couldn't hit anyone because if she had or tried to, she would have fallen over. But she could scream and she could break things. The question when somebody has this rage inside of her is not to stop her hitting someone over the head with a saucepan, but it's better to have stop it before it happens. But it's to understand, where is it coming from? Why is it? And then the realization is we were working with a very good psychiatrist who really helped us. What happens when somebody has 40 years of humiliation? 40 years of humiliation. During the 30s, she was born in 1933. There were no schools for people with disabilities. She was the shame of her family. She was sort of hidden away. She's handicapped. And I use that word in a derogative way. Humiliation. For 40 years of humiliation, of being looked down upon, of being seen as no value, of being a disappointment to her parents. And of course she was a disappointment, because someone, the culture is saying you must be a success, and if you're not a success, you're no good. 40 years of humiliation. 40 years of it being signified, you're no good. You have no value. 40 years of not being able to say what she wants. She's not allowed to have the wants, the desires. 40 years of humiliation. It is a long road to freedom. It's a long road for freedom. It's a long road when one has lived 40 years of humiliation to discover who one is and to discover the beauty of being a human person and having freedom of conscience. 40 years of being pushed down. 40 years of being told you're no good. And of course then she becomes convinced that she is no good. Many people in our world have been humiliated. They've been told they're no good. They've been pushed around. Children, adults, you're no good. You have no value. So, 40 years of being made to feel that you are not valuable, not precious, not important. So it's a long time. It takes a long road to freedom. And it's a long road for assistants who come to L'Arche, wanting to do good, therefore a certain superiority, doing good, to become conscious that their value is not in doing good, their value is in developing relationships, in listening to people, of being formed as we listen to people and become changed, as we discover that we're all part of an incredible family, just a family of human beings. Incredibly beautiful family, made up of people extremely different in culture, in religion, in disabilities, in capacities, and all the rest, in the way we hold on to or reveal our weaknesses and our strengths. So for somebody like Janine, it's a long road to freedom. Maybe just say a few of the passages to help her to move from that violence to peacefulness. At the end of, or near the end of her life, sometimes she had grown old and peaceful. And sometimes I'd go and sit beside her and she would put her good hand on my head and she'd say, "Poor old man." Incredible tenderness in this woman. But there'd been that transformation from humiliation which had caused or created that sense that she has no value, to the gradual realization she is something and can make decisions and grow and love at her pace. To begin with, to be with Janine is to be very close to her body, to be gentle to her body, to love her body, to touch the body, how to give her a shower, a washing, whatever it is, how for her to find the professionals, medical or otherwise, because it all begins with body. that she gradually becomes at ease with body, with her body. The body was the place where her hemiplegia, epilepsy had appeared. So there's something about helping her gradually that her body is a place of communication with the right doctors, with the nurses, with the people, the assistants who are there to touch her gently, to respect her deeply. So as I say, it begins with body. About food, rest, clothes, how she might want her hair to be done, all the rest of body. To be conscious of her body, which she had been at anger with. So she must find people respectful, tender for the body. She needs people, as I say, around her with empathy, understanding. Tell me your pain, tell me your suffering. To be treated as a person, as a vulnerable, and listened to. Listen to with respect. And then for her to be in an environment or a milieu which gives her safety, a sense of safety. That it's okay to be herself, that she's safe, and that she has her room in the community, because we live together in houses where maybe there can be maybe 7 or 8 people like Janine, with a few people who have come to discover that living in L'Arche is a gospel win. But then gradually, what happens as we live together is that people meet her, a meeting. Something very special about meeting someone. Feeling not just an empathy, but a oneness. People will stay on in L'Arche when they discover that they're not there to do good, but they will be doing, but they're there because they like to be with Janine. Because Janine doesn't want to live all the time with professionals. She wants to live with friends. So that's a long road. I'll say a few words about, for the assistants, the road of assistance. To move from the head to the heart. To move from a sense of control and power to the humility of a meeting. I have been with you, and I love you. And a oneness to be together, to become a friend. Because nobody really had trusted her. So it's not just a question of having an empathy for her, it's also that she must feel people really trust a relationship of friendship, of mutuality, of communion, being together. And being together in a milieu or an environment which is a community, where we can laugh together and sing together. You see, the mystery of the role of who is Jesus is God so loved the world that he sent his only beloved, not to judge or condemn, but to liberate. What he wants is that we human beings be happy. That's what it's all about. Not people who are tense in doing good. I'm not criticizing the idea of doing good. I'm saying it's important to be happy. Everything begins with the mother-child in a relationship of happiness, of laughter. Giddy, 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 giddy. Mother-child and all the rest. Father-child also. I mean, it's this happiness of relationship, of joy, of relationship. But not a relationship where we possess. Relationship of communion. A relationship where I don't hold on to you, I don't possess you. I reveal, to love someone is to reveal to them that they are precious. And then to uplift them. In French we would say, révéler et relever. To reveal through our eyes and our body attitude that you are more precious than you dare believe. And if I can trust you, you will trust yourself. Timothy mentioned that moment when I asked my dad if I could join the Royal Naval College in Dartmouth. And when he said, I trust you. That trust, when I was 13, I can see now was my initiation to adulthood. That I was doing something my parents would not want me to do, but with their blessing. It's very different. They didn't want me to cross the Atlantic where ships were being sunk, but I went with their blessing. Because somewhere we are to help people to raise them up so they could be themselves. I don't possess you, but I reveal and then help you to uplift, to discover who you are, who I am, that we are precious. And that, of course, the 40 years of humiliation of Janine, she was so convinced that she was no good that she hadn't yet access to her freedom of conscience. To arrive at a certain freedom, and inner freedom, it's a long road to freedom. To have an access to that freedom, you need an environment of trust, and the gradual, that her certitude that she was no good didn't crush the reality of her consciousness, of her beauty. And then she lived a very deep experience. Maybe many people with disabilities live an experience. She lived a very deep experience when she discovered that she was loved by God. That's an inner experience of light. And in our communities, we don't push people. We wait for people to say, I want to get to know Jesus more. Therefore, to be in some way in communication, harmony with the universe, the source of the universe, the infinite, the universal. Because Janine's not just her family, it's not just Lash. She has a communication which goes much further, deeper, wider. That's for her. And people live this experience of being part of something much bigger than themselves. They live it in different ways. They live it as an experience of being loved. They can live it as an experience of being in communion with the beauty of the universe. I mean, each person has their role. For her, it was important. And then to go and ask Petrama, the Dominican, to tell him all about Jesus and to be baptized. And as I say, little by little, she discovered that she could give life to people. And when she put her hand on my head and said, "Poor old man," I don't say I went up to her place and sat beside her hoping that she would put her hand on my head. But I sensed in her a power of tenderness, a power of kindness, which she needed to give out, fecundity, fruitfulness. It's what is important for Janine through the experience of being in a community where we celebrate life together, discovering that people around us see her as precious and as important. The discovery of communion with God. Discovery that she's not just loved because she's Janine, but she's loved because she gives life. She gives life. It's a long road to freedom. A long road which maybe we never really attain. For assistance, it's the same thing. It's a long road for assistance to move from I've come to do good, I've come because my parents are happy that I'm there, to the consciousness that our world is upside down. There's something wrong. We're all tending to move towards a world or a society that's like a pyramid where we have to go up the ladder. And yet the discovery that we're meant to be a body, where every body is important. And everybody has a gift to give. Everybody has a gift to receive, because we're all part of something much wider, much bigger, much greater, much more beautiful than we can dare imagine. And that's a transition. Because many of those who come, there's that compulsion to be the best, to be recognized by superiors as important, a sort of compulsion, a need to be important, each one at their place, but that need. With the corresponding difficulty of really becoming a friend of the rejected. Because we don't quite know how to live that friendship with somebody who's rejected. But that also, there's a compulsion of being part of a group, a family. One of the texts of Jesus, it's a very moving text. You could read it in Luke, where Jesus says, when you give a meal, don't invite the members of your family. I thought he was rather pro-family. Don't invite the members of your family. Don't invite your rich neighbors. Don't invite your friends. What Jesus is saying, don't remain in the clan where we flatter each other. You're super. No, you are super. We are super. The others. Break out from the clan. Discover humanity. Discover the beauty of people. Be on a road of discovery. Don't be in a fortress. Be part of a fountain. Not a fortress, but a fountain. Where we're together to give life. It's not so easy. I was told yesterday of a bishop in Uganda, and he was part of a reconciliation team of reconciliation. Somebody asked him, because his tribe was in conflict, and he said, my tribe is the human family. That is my tribe. We're together. We are human beings together. That doesn't mean to say, I don't need my family, I don't need my culture, I need my community. I belong to a community. But a community is not a place that retains me, that holds me back. It's a fountain where we belong to each other, where I need people. I need people who love me as I get older, even when I was young. We need friends, we need people who are committed and we're together. But also a community that brings me to freedom. Not to crush my freedom, but help me to grow. It's a long road to freedom. It's a long road for assistance. To discover that the world is upside down. A long road. Some of the assistants, I remember giving a talk in a Catholic school in Paris, and somebody said, it were the parents there who had asked me to come and speak to them. And they said, what is one of your problems? I said, one of our problems are parents of assistants. You love it when your son or daughter comes for 6 months, but if they stay, that is the catastrophe. Because you've done all these studies and you're going to live with people like that. That expression, like that. So we have to go through passages of growth, where there's an inner change, of a vision of who I am. Who am I? To discover my importance of who I am. That I have a mission, we all have a mission. That we are called to grow as human beings and as disciples of Jesus. There's a bit more love, a bit less hate. A little bit more mutual understanding and mutual listening, mutual appreciation. And it's a long road. Assistants need to be accompanied, they need to find the source, they need to find the spirituality. They need to discover that friendship with people like Pauline or Eric or others, it transforms. Can it be possible that a relationship with the outcast can transform us and bring us to a discovery of what it means to be human, what it means to grow as a human being, what it means to grow as a disciple of Jesus, to grow together. What it means to be part of a community where we love each other and hurt each other. That's what community is all about. To give life and to be wounded, and yet to discover that as we live with wounded people, they help us welcome our own wounds. If Janine has gone through all that and she's found peace, I too can go through that. Go through loss. Go through difficulties. Go through conflict and discover something which is precious, which is forgiveness. Because that's what community is about. It's about forgiveness. Because we are all in a situation where we want to defend our group, our culture, where we want to rise up, be more important. So all of us, we have to be strict. It's a beautiful text of Etty Hillesum, that young Jewish woman who at the age of 29 died at Auschwitz. And she wrote that book of broken life in French, Vivre Verset, where she says, I have now integrated death into my life. I'm no longer frightened of death. I've integrated it. And I find that those people who have not integrated death into their life becomes a meager life. And she says it's a paradox that when we've integrated death, our life becomes richer, because we dare to live. We dare even to do things which people don't especially want us to do. And when I say integrated death into life, I would say also integrated deaths, loss, bereavement, because that's what it's about. We're called to grow, we're called to be diminished in many ways. We're called to be successful, but we're also called to fail. That's the reality. And then through all that, we can grow and discover that life is much more beautiful than we dare believe. Timothy, I think it's time. Yes, it is.
To come through into the priory refectory, where we can offer you some wine, even some water, to practice some of that conviviality and friendship. Just two things before I do so. The first, just to say that at 7:15, there will be Vespers back here in the church for those who wish to attend the Vespers. Secondly, that I would ask you if you could move fairly smartly in a moment through to the refectory, because there will be celebration of Mass here at 6:15, and we need a little bit of time just to set things up for those who wish to attend Mass. I've remembered a third thing. The third thing is just to say that if you would like to make a donation on your way out, or on your way through to the refectory, please do so. It'll be very gratefully received. And finally, and most importantly, really, to thank Jean for being with us, for inspiring us, and for giving us courage to go forward on that road to freedom. Thank you very much, Jean.